Hit go live still. That's interesting. There we go. Apparently I can't just stream. I actually have to say go live in my one chat as well. Okay, that's fun. So I have no idea how much of this actually picked up on the stream on the live, which is fun. And my glasses are covered in something. So anyway, as I was jokingly saying, I was at one time debating naming a podcast the Pagan Power Hour and having it like an hour-long podcast, episodes like once or twice per week. I did do a podcast, like a pre-recorded one for a while there. Didn't really take off. I called it Ancient Arts of the Mind, Body, and Soul, where we just talked about spirituality and historical stuff. So very similar to what I talk about in a lot of my YouTube content lately. But yeah, today's topic was going to be talking about circles. So those of you who've been watching my content for a while know I talk about thought theory and my personal interpretation when it comes to things that I'm interested in. And one of those has to do with some of the, I guess, revival reconstruction paths. Some people like to use the term pagan. I'm not really a huge fan of the term pagan for various reasons. But I wanted to start digging into some of the practices I had learned about through hearsay and through books. A lot of books, like pretty much back in the 90s, that's pretty much all we had available to us was books and other people who usually just read books as well. And it seems a lot of the modern practices seem to be coming from three individuals. There's like a group of them, like Ross Nichols, Gerald Gardner, and Aleister Crowley. And a lot of the different practices seems to branch out from that. And one of those practices is casting circles. So there's various reasons why people might cast a circle. And I think that there are some actual historical references that go back beyond 100 years. So a lot of the writings that I'm noticing that a lot of individuals and folks use for like neo-revival reconstruction stuff tends to be like from the early 1900s, late 1800s. But older stuff than that, you usually don't find a lot of that in modern practices. Let's see. Sor Lisbeth says, good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the stream. And then Alum Bristrick says, hello. Can you have some live stuff where we can discuss about animism? You betcha. Definitely going to continue to do different topics going forward in the future, and I can add that on, maybe do a little poll or just make it the topic in general. But yes, absolutely, we can talk about some animism stuff and different ways people try to interpret that or adapt it to their own practices. Most of my experience and exposure to animism stuff has been, I looked up the term and I apply it the way I would think of applying it. So I can see pieces of that in some of the Reconstruction Revival stuff. But as far as I know, animism, I believe, is the one where it's the basic concept and theory that everything has like a spirit or a soul or an essence to it. I believe that's what animism essentially means. So now I want to verify animism. The belief in the existence of individual spirits that inhabit natural objects and phenomenon. Yeah, basically. But yeah, we could definitely do a live around that. That would be a kind of a cool discussion and topic. And actually, towards the end of this, depending on how long we talk about magic circles for, we can always come back to that. So when I first learned about how to cast a circle, and that's one way of phrasing it. You can say using a magic circle. There's different ways of phrasing it. I don't remember what books. I mean, I probably still have the books, and I don't remember which books first mentioned it. But over time, from reading books and talking with other practitioners in my local area, which was few and far between, let me tell you, it was mostly around the idea of creating a sacred space for ritualistic or ceremonial magic to build up energy and release it all at one time. So some individuals might do it when they are doing spell work and spellcraft. Some of them might be doing it if they're doing a ceremony, just to have, again, that collective vibration building up. The way that I always thought of it was more like a bubble or an orb, where you would mark the circle on the ground, and there's multiple ways to do this, but you would essentially mark the circle on the ground of where that bubble or that orb touched the surface of the earth, and then there'd be a dome above it and a dome below it, which takes to that popular phrase that you hear all too often, as above, so below. Now, I don't want to dig into that too much, because that's going to actually get into the Emerald Tablet conversation, which we'll address in a different live in the future. But the idea here like I said, for some individuals, was to use this orb to kind of gather and raise energy and vibration to release for a particular purpose all at one time. It also works as kind of a protective shell, a barrier, so nothing interferes with your workings. When I say workings, I mean like your ceremonial or ritualistic magic that you're practicing. Yes, that's true. How to support you. Do you have a Patreon? I do not have a Patreon yet. I've actually looked into getting a Patreon. So I do appreciate the interest. So maybe that's something I can look into in the future. But as of right now, no, I do not have one. I like this quote. The world is full of persons, only some of them are human. Graham Harvey. Interesting. What do you like the most about that quote? Because I think there's a couple ways of interpreting what they might have meant by that. When I first hear that, there's a lot of persons and only some of them are humans. It depends on what you define a human as being. Is human being humane and being kind to other individuals, or is human the human experience, whereas other people are just personalities and they don't have any depth to them? I don't know. There's different ways that you can interpret that. I'm kind of curious what your interpretation would be. While you're answering that, talking about circles, even though that's one way of bringing up the vibration, I started asking myself, okay, so I've learned this basic concept of casting a magic circle, and you can do it by pointing a wand. You can do it by pointing your fingers. One book, and I believe this comes from A Grimoire of Shadows by Ed Fitch, I believe, they talk about five elements, and your fingers are associated with each of the 5 elements. And if I remember correctly, I believe it was your index finger was fire, your middle finger was spirit, the ring finger was earth, and then the pinky, I believe, was air, and the thumb was water. I would have to look that up because I don't have it memorized. But the idea is if you use these 2 fingers, which would be fire and spirit, would be the equivalent of using like an athame to draw out, or a ritualistic knife. Athame is one of the terms that is used in modern witchcraft as well as Wicca, because they are 2 different practices. That is a black-handled knife that's not supposed to cut anything, that's used for directing of energy. It's, again, ceremonial. It's sympathetic magic, where something represents something else. And you could trace on the ground as you point to it and visualize. Some people visualize blue fire coming out from their fingertips, or flame of some form, or just spiritual essence. Whatever the case may be, people will visualize different things of tracing that circle, and they'll either walk in a circle or they'll actually walk the circle. So you could stand in the center and spin, or you could walk around the circle. I've also seen people take a staff, a magical staff, and walk the perimeter, tapping the ground. Depending if you walk clockwise or counterclockwise, depends on the tradition. Whether you're going, I guess, clockwise or widdershins would be the counterclockwise term that I've heard used most frequently. And you tap the ground and walk it 3 times. I've heard of other people taking stones and actually putting stones around the border, and they will keep these in a little pouch and carry them with them. And these are blessed stones that they've enchanted to use for ritualistic practice, and they'll place around the outside, leaving a doorway where you enter and exit through, because you're not supposed to cross that circle once you've created that sacred space. And I've heard of people saying different type of spell, which is usually speaking their words in rhyme and saying as above so below. Again, these are all modern neo practices. I don't know where they come from, other than a couple books, talking with other individuals, and coming up with my own theories on how it could be practiced. So again, this is all hearsay stuff that's not grounded in historical reality, but rather a modern practice, which may only be something I came up with and I don't remember, or I heard it from somewhere and got inspired by it, or it was something that was created in the last 100 years or so. But this seems to be what a lot of people do when they talk about casting circles. And let's see, then there's also, you can sit in a circle, you can hold hands in a circle, you can have a group of people do a circle together. Some people will call the 4 corners, which actually comes from Christianity, believe it or not, which we can, again, discuss in a future live. So this sacred space is supposed to be created. Then you do whatever your ceremony is, whether you're honoring or blessing, or you're burning herbs, lighting candles, chanting, meditating, directing, whatever you want to do in that ritualistic space. And then you release that circle, and it's supposed to release all of those built up energies, like popping. Exactly. That explosive of a power that even the dogs feel it. No. It's supposed to have that burst of energy all at one time. So it's like a gathering in a building, kind of like if you were breathing, let's say if you think of a smoker, instead of breathing out smoke, you breathe it into a bag and fill it up, or a balloon, and get a whole bunch of smoke together and then pop it and have all the smoke release at one time would be different than little bursts of smoke continuously. To me, it defines animism, that the world is full of persons, only some of them are human. So you're saying that basically thinking of the individual existence of these objects and other beings being considered persons, but some of them are human persons, whereas others are just their different type of person. That's an interesting way to think about it. I could see that being applied to animism. This is interesting about magic protection circles. All and other types of protection, because I don't want to take with me something small, evilish to my home. Yes, absolutely. I also think of the circles as a sphere. Interesting. Right. So I don't think that concept of being a sphere or an orb is unique to myself, but based upon what I had read in the 90s and what I used to do, that makes the most sense to me, is to think about it as an orb. That is really interesting. Really good to go over these topics and analyze what is going on with the ritual. Hello, Fadista. Welcome to the stream. Good to see you again. Yeah. And now, I've also seen and heard of people that if they're going to do readings, sometimes they will cast a circle. Let's see. There was one rhyme, and I don't remember where I read it. I believe it was from one of the witchcraft books, but cast a circle thrice about to keep unwelcome spirits out. And I believe, is that part of the read? I think it's actually part of one of the reads that I read. So it might be a Wiccan read that I read that in. See, now I'm gonna look it up, because you always got to confirm your sources. Cast a circle thrice about to keep welcome spirits out. Okay, it is part of the Wiccan read. So it's a Wiccan thing, not necessarily a witchcraft thing. Not to say others don't use it as well. What about pentacle? Is this enough to have? Yeah, a pentagram is a protective symbol. Specifically, not just the pentagram itself, but the pentacle. You're saying pentacle because you're talking about a pentagram with equal arms and a circle around it, because a pentagram is just a 5-pointed star, whereas a pentacle has a circle as well. And yes, it's a circle of protection, and it is used as a protection symbol by many. And again, we can dig into that in great detail in future lives as well. But yes, when it comes to, and that's one of the points I wanted to get to when it comes to casting a circle. Some people will cast a circle if they're doing readings, if they're doing medium work where they're speaking with those who have passed away. Some will do it when they're doing, again, ceremony or ritual magic, or if they're celebrating the holidays. But not everybody casts circles. Not everybody feels the need to do it. Not everybody feels like that's something that's important to do. So is having a pentagram or a pentacle enough? Yes, absolutely. Some people do not even wear pentagrams or pentacles because, again, there's a lot of different paths that follow into the New Age revival reconstruction stuff. So it's kind of up to you if you want to wear anything for protection, or if you want to, get tattoos or symbols or speak spells or cast circles. It completely, it's up to each individual. Good to catch you live. Been out of pocket for a bit. Yeah, I'm glad you're able to attend. One of the requests individuals had, see, I'm enjoying the live. So when I make video topics, I keep wanting to make a little 10-minute quick video, and I want to make it nice, so I want to edit it. I want to put up screenshots. So there's some time in editing. There's some time in recording with a decent camera instead of my webcam. So I usually use my mobile phone lately, which has got pretty decent quality. Then I use my microphone, and I do editing to clear up the audio, and then I'll put in some extra pictures. But I also want to do research and make sure it's very specific, and I want to get to the point within a short amount of time. So basically making a little 5 or 10 minute video can sometimes take me 3 or 4 hours to make. Maybe a little less, but roughly a couple hours to make. And there's the whole planning it out and everything else, and making sure I don't sound like pausing, like a natural conversation like I'm having during a live. Not to mention, too, by having a live, I have the chat to act interact with, act off of, to like see what you're saying, take suggestions, and direct the conversation instead of me just speaking into a camera. So it's not that I don't want to make videos anymore. I do. It's just easier for me to do a live once a week. So I'm going to try to do both. But every time I plan to do it, it takes forever. I did an apple video on apple magic and talking about different ways that you can use an apple ritualistically, or when you cut it in half, how basically there's a pentagram in the center of it with the seeds, it makes a star. And I did one on tea, and I talked about the associations with tea with the 5 elements, how you're introducing water to fire to heat it up, and then you're taking the herbs, which is earth, that you're adding, and then you're letting it cool off in the air. You're actually touching all 4 of the elements that are traditionally practiced in a lot of neo-polytheism today. And then if you want to charge it with spirit, then you would say a few words over it, or just make your tea with intent to give it that 5th element if you wanted to. But it took a while to get to this. And I want to try to get to making stuff and interacting more. I'm also curious on what folks want to hear about. I have a passion about this stuff. I like to talk about it, but I'm also not an expert. In fact, most of the time that I've spent, like I said, I've been since the 1990s. Trying to think. I want to say I was like 13 when I got my first spellbook, which was Scott Cunningham's Earth Power. I think that's the first book I got. It was a gift from my mom for my birthday. I think I was 13. So I'm 41 now. So if I subtract 13, so you're talking about 28 years. So about 28 years, I've spent a lot of time reading what people claim. Lately, especially in the last 2 to 3 years, I've been very, very interested in finding historical stuff. So now I'm asking myself why. So as I've talked about a lot of stuff with the circle casting so far, I don't know where any of that stuff comes from. It's just things that we talk about if we are into revival reconstruction stuff. But we don't say, why do we do that? Where does it come from? What tradition is it really? Because I'm finding that, like, right now, there's a huge interest in heathenry. Now, people are calling it Norse paganism. I call it heathenry. But they're approaching it like it's Wicca with different deities. And, like, they're using, like, there's a couple people, they're practicing the Wheel of the Year, which we know has origins in some of the Celtic-speaking cultures, like Ireland and France, England. You know, so areas like that, but they're still calling it Norse paganism and practicing those holidays. And I'm like, so what's the connection between the two? Or they will do ceremonies and ritual, like high ceremonial magic, which we do not have any historical evidence of them doing in Scandinavia. Now, I'm not criticizing those people and saying they can't do that, but that's what I want to avoid. And that's why I want to talk to people. I'm not talking to people like I know all of this. I'm talking to people because this is stuff that I'm interested in, have a passion about, that I'm researching, that I'm trying to find information on, and I want to share it with others and have a conversation for 2 reasons. One, I don't want other folks out there to be misled by these people that are basically filling it with fluff, that have no historical accuracy or evidence of where things came from. But also, some of you out there might have resources you can share with myself as well, because I'm acknowledging the fact that I'm still learning, because it's always a journey. Regardless of how long you've done stuff for, the question then comes to the accuracy of it. You can spend years of your life studying something that has no substance. Doesn't mean there's not value in studying it at all, but I'm looking for the substance now, and I'm trying to share what I find along the way with others. Anyway, off my soapbox for a second. The Dusty Dud. Hey, Blaze, I've noticed Cherokee, Celts, Eastern religions, and I think Norse all have an idea of reincarnation or rebirth. Why do you think that is? Do you think ideas were shared, or is there more to it? I personally feel like individuals, when it comes to different cultures, have something similar, because at the end of the day, we're all humans. We're all trying to connect with something. I like to call it divinity. We're trying to connect with the divine. So our way of connecting with it, we're trying to rationalize which makes sense. So a lot of people say they have past lives for various reasons, including having natural aptitude to do certain things, or having flashes or memories of time periods. Today, you might watch a movie or a TV show and feel very connected with it, but not have any biological connection to that. So where does that come from? One theory on where some of our attributes and natural aptitudes might come from is genetics. It could be part of our DNA. So perhaps we have DNA memories from our ancestors. So our past lives are, in fact, what our ancestors used to live, and it's passed to us through our DNA. Could be some sort of thing deep in our DNA that we don't understand as well. Then there's also the possibility of spiritual reincarnation. And I think it depends on the individual you speak with, because in the Norse Scandinavian traditions, I do not know of anything from the sagas that suggests people get reborn. When you die, you're dead. Modern Norse pagans that are trying to reconstruct stuff, I think, again, are taking traditions from other cultures and trying to adapt them. If I am wrong, please share your sources with me, but I do not know of any actual historical Scandinavian sources that say that the Norse people believed in reincarnation, nor the Germanic people. Now, as far as... what was the other one that you mentioned, too? Cherokee, I don't know anything about the Cherokee tradition. I was not aware of the fact that they believed in reincarnation. Yes, I'm familiar with the Eastern religions, and that's actually why I think a lot of neo-pagan groups do it. A lot of things that are taken in modern neo-reconstruction revival stuff is borrowed from some of the Eastern traditions, such as Hinduism and stuff. You can actually even find like the 5 elements and stuff from the Titwas, Titwas. If you look that up, you can actually see the 5 elements and how they're actually pronounced. And I don't know what the language is. I assume it's Hindi, maybe. I don't know. I don't know what the actual language is, but I know it comes from Hinduism. And a lot of those traditions, such as reincarnation, I believe, come from that. The other one that you mentioned was Celts. So Celts was a language group. A lot of people try to think of Celts as a single tribe. It was a large language group with a lot of different practices. And some of those, if you look up the map for where the Celts were, let's actually do that together, and then we'll get back to magic circles. I like having the open conversation, and I hope people watching this after the live are interested in it as well, but either way I am, so. Celt. Yeah, here we go. So if I share my browser here, and I take my handsome face and shrink it to the corner. So these are, if you look up the Celtic world, so BCE, I love using that term. Before Common Era. Some people like to use the term BC, before Christ, and AD, which actually is Anno Domini. It is Latin. It means after the year of our Lord is what it means. So I use CE, which is Common Era, and BCE, which is before Common Era. So this group does it as well. So 400 BCE, which would be 400 years before the Common Era. So once you hit year 0, you go back 400 years. That's what we're talking about. Look how big this area is. All of these areas were Celtic language groups. So the only one I know of is the Irish, which is they spoke Gaelic, as far as I know. This is like Gaul down here, which is now France. Is that France? I think that's France. Yeah, but Gaul became France, and this area here, of course, became England. So you can see it goes pretty far. So when I talk about that, I think when we talk about reincarnation, I don't know if it was the entire Celtic world. I don't know. If it is, it's fine. I do know that in the Irish area that they did, that there is a land of the dead when you died in old Irish traditions, like back when it was a Celtic world. They called it Tír na nÓg. So Tír na nÓg, as I understand it from some of my readings, I do not have the sources in front of me. This is my attempt to remember something I had read somewhere, that when you die in Tír na nÓg, you get reborn here. When you die here, you get reborn in Tír na nÓg. So you bounce back and forth between the two worlds. That's one of the things that I believe was from some of those traditions. I don't know how accurate that is, though. But again, that's why I'm going back. Everything that I think I might have known, I'm trying to research, pinpoint things at a time, and say, where did this come from? So we'll get back to this, because I've got some stuff about magic circles up in the tabs above as well. So let's stick me front and center again. Hey-ya! Oop, I'm not centered. There we go. Centered with my beautiful tree in the background. I'm using my green screen. Aren't you proud of me? All right. Let's go back to the chat. But, oh, yeah, because we were talking about all of these different traditions. So, yeah, a lot of them did believe in different forms of reincarnation, and I believe that it is our attempt to understand why we might have this connection. I also think it's humans' way of trying to say, well, what happens to us when we cease to be? Because we could just cease to be, like just die, we're gone. We could go to an afterworld, which means people would continuously be created again, and they'll live, they'll die, they'll live, they'll die. Well, if you keep going in one direction, that means an infinite number of people will be created and filling up this afterlife. If you look at modern science today, there is a principle in science that energy is not created or destroyed. It's just changed. That means everything gets recycled. So if our bodies get recycled, does that mean our spirits get recycled as well? So I think it's just the human nature of trying to understand and interpret what happens after life. That's why they believe in a reincarnation. It's the same thing when you talk about stuff like many different cultures had some form of a creature that you would classify as a dragon. Now, some, like most people, will argue there's no physical historical evidence that dragons existed. Okay, fine. Doesn't mean there's not something spiritual. There's at least something culturally speaking that a lot of people thought of these big creatures. Is it from dinosaur bones? Who knows? That's my theory anyway. Alum says, I'm fixing some food here so I can ask you to go much, so I leave you talk free. Awesome. What did I miss? What else were you asking about? Fadista said, vids involve a lot. It takes a good amount of time. I appreciate the work that goes into it. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate the historical origins a lot. That is one thing I like about your channel. We have to almost be archaeologists to get a sense of depth. Right, and I don't feel that, and I've said this in videos before, I do not feel that the age of a path makes it more or less valid. Like, just because a tradition like Hinduism or something like that, Hinduism has got thousands of years of documented history and practice. That, to me, doesn't make them more accurate than something like Wicca, which has been around for maybe 100 years. Maybe. And people will argue all the time, well, it comes from this older source. Okay, where's your proof? Oh, it was passed in secret by word of mouth. So what about the telephone game? So you're going to tell me, without any historical evidence of how old your path is, it's that old because you say it is? If you can't trace it back and prove how old it is, it's irrelevant to the greater group of world society. We need evidence as people, or it's hearsay. Hearsay is fine. I think, let's see, UPG, unverified personal gnosis, which is basically your own personal experiences in spirituality, is very important for spirituality. But it's also important, in my opinion, that if you're going to share and have other people buy into your own UPG, you have to be able to tie it back to something. And if that's as simple as saying, this is my interpretation, great, I can respect that. What I can't respect is people trying to sell something as, oh, it's been around since the dawn of time. Okay, well, where was it used? Where's proof that it's been around since the dawn of time? Because you yourself have not been there since the dawn of time. Even if you believe in reincarnation, if reincarnation is true, and I think I believe in reincarnation, I think it's pretty clear that we are who we are now, not who we were. So if, let's assume, and take away the argument of reincarnation, regardless of what your personal beliefs are, we don't remember everything like we remember this lifetime. We don't remember that lifetime the same way we remember this lifetime. And in that sense, we cannot claim things have been around forever just because we believe we were there living in a past life that was like that. That's my opinion. But yes, I'm glad you like it. But that's why that's where I'm going with my studies, is I want to have the historical stuff behind it. I've studied enough of theology and New Age stuff, and I'm now to the point of I want to look at the historical stuff. That's just where my path's taking me. So I'm glad you're enjoying the ride, because I'm trying to share it with others. Tiny Tabernacle, Brett, welcome to the stream. Good to see you. I believe that we can inherit virtues and vice versa hereditarily, and some of those virtues or vices may be corresponding with certain spiritual practices and spirituality. So you can inherit a tradition there. Speaking of your beliefs in DNA thing, yes, and that's a fair theory, and I think that is something that can be true. I think a lot of us get too tied up to sometimes, like there's a huge debate over whether or not people can practice revival reconstruction or existing spiritual paths that are from other cultures. Some people argue it's a cultural thing, you have no right to it. And then other people argue, well, it's human nature and interpretation. Why can't we be inspired by that and be interpreted? I personally feel people can do whatever they want as long as they do it with respect. But yeah, I do believe that things can come through spiritually, even if it is connected to the DNA. It might just be something we don't fully understand, potentially. If we go back there, our evolution, I don't think any religion or spirituality has been around since the beginning of time. I would agree with you on that. I also think that it drastically changes. If you take any group, whatever spirituality you were raised in, if you were raised in one, if you were to ask your parents who raised you in that spirituality versus someone who you may or may not have practiced with, like in America at least, it is very common to be one of the monotheistic faiths. Some form of Christianity is very popular, and I would say, I don't know, what, 60% of the country is probably? We probably go with the census. U.S. Census on religion, right? Let's see what pops up. U.S. religious census. And again, see, I like to look this stuff up because I don't want to just make up BS. I want to actually look at it. So U.S. religious census. So here we go. Why is it not just showing me? 2020 study? Oh, I haven't been 2 years or 3 years since they've studied it. I just want to see a breakdown. It's not that hard. Study with data mapping. Huh. Data collected. Ooh. Okay. So it's not going to show me the percentages, huh? Adherence rate. Adherence, like how many people follow it. So in this particular census, which was from the... No, see, that's only one county. I don't want one county. I want the entirety of the U.S. I don't want to just do county at a time, but I'll say that's not enough people. There we go. There we go. Oh, wow. All right. So as of 2020, does it show me the percentages, though? I want to see the percentages, not just the thing. See, this is cool. Looking at reports like this tells you a little bit more. Yeah. Oh, such a small percentage. Makes you feel alone. Okay, so let's take this here and let's try to zoom in just a little bit here. So if you look at this website, and I know it's kind of hard to read, so I'll read these for you here, and you go down the list, you can see on this pie chart right over here, the rough, I guess, percentage here. I guess that's 14%. Yeah, this is the percent who identify. So 14%, 16% is the biggest, actually. And this is this greenish area. So these are like Protestants, right? Protestants at the top, and then Catholic, Latter-day Saints, Christian, Protestants, Hispanic Catholics, Jehovah's Witnesses in the green. So mostly Protestants, Catholics in a lot of these areas. And then you have Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist. All this yellow area is Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, Unitarian Universalism, other religion, which is this very small percentage. And then 23% of the country is unaffiliated, and 2% don't know or refuse to identify themselves. So as you can see here, I mean, you could probably go with the 23%. So maybe a quarter of the country might potentially be someone who gets into this New Age stuff. So knowing that kind of information, it's pretty, I can pretty much say with confidence that for the most part, most of the people in the United States are some form, or at least 50% of the country, right? Yeah, maybe a little over 50%, like 60% of the country, like I was saying, is probably Christian. So if you ask any of these people to describe their spirituality and their religion, how many answers do you think you're going to get? So I think that's the same thing when you talk about a lot of these other traditions and stuff. When you go from one generation to the next, you can't say it's been around since the dawn of time. What you are doing is a modern interpretation of your religion. So even if you're connected with a religion like Christianity or Protestantism or Hinduism or Buddhism that has a large history and track record of how it was done, you're going to have modern interpretations. If you look at the way Christianity is practiced in the United States and compare it how it's done in Japan or in Norway or in China or in England, you're going to have variances based upon the culture where it's being practiced. Iceland, for example, as many of you know, some of you may not, but my mother was born in Iceland. So I'm very interested in Icelandic traditions. I'm also very interested in some of the Scandinavian traditions because of that. I have ancestors that were from that region. Looking at the way that they practice Christianity today, because even in Iceland, vast majority of them have to be are associated with the Lutheran Church. There's a Lutheran church in the middle of Reykjavik, which is our capital. But one of the stories I heard, and this is on YouTube, you can look this up, they're talking about the Hudafolk. Now, the Hudafolk are hidden people. And they actually have a story in Christianity that God was coming down to check on Adam and Eve and how they're doing, and check on all their children. Well, Adam and Eve told all their children to dress up and look nice and presentable for God. Some of their children were very messy, and they didn't clean up, and they panicked at the last minute and told them to go hide. Well, God came down to check on them and said, well, all your children are here. Yeah, all our children are here. Well, God, knowing that they were lying, says, well, I know that you were hiding some of the children from me, so now they'll be forever hidden. So supposedly the Hurdafolk, which is basically like fairies and dwarves and elves and stuff, the Alfar, the Dvevgar, which is how you say it in Icelandic, these hidden people, these fairies and stuff, were essentially children of Adam and Eve that were basically hidden from everyone's sight because they were trying to hide them from God. Tell me that, like, what other version of Christianity has that? They tied in their cultural traditions into the way they're practicing their spirituality. And that's just an example. Like, it's the same reason why there's this huge movement in the US, like, put Christ back in Christmas, because a lot of people are doing Christmas and they're not doing it for Christ. They're just doing it because it's a cultural celebration. So again, having a tradition and saying it's that old, it is your way of practicing that. So there's going to be interpretation. So why can't you be inspired by other paths? We live in a world where we can literally learn about other religions and cultures and languages at the click of a button. Doesn't mean it's accurate, but we at least have exposure to it. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. Man, I can ramble. This is the other reason I like to do lives. I can get in these long conversations and just ramble on. Wikipedia says 63%. Yes. So I was pretty close. Thank you for that. Darn, I'm late. Oh, hey, Source Sister. No worries. Let's see. We've been live for 37 minutes, so we're still going. We got sidetracked with a couple of conversations, which I like to do. I like to keep the live open and continuing to discuss things. But since I've answered all the questions in chat, I am going to reapproach talking about circle practices. So we talked about some of the ways people do circles and why they might do it. We talked about, I'm a Christian, but I'm a big fan of Celtic and Norse stuff, hence I'm here. Awesome, well, welcome. Doesn't matter what spiritual practice you do, everyone is welcome here. The only thing I ask is people respect each other, so awesome. Yeah, and that's the thing I think that is so fascinating and neat, and that's one of the reasons why I had one of the topics that we can talk about is so many people give Christians crud for saying, oh, well, Christianity has pagan DNA. I can flip that on its head easily and say modern neo-paganism has Christian DNA because it's the Christians that wrote the stuff down. So when you're looking at some of the stuff in the Celtic or Norse stuff, let's take the Celtic stuff. So in Wales and Ireland and stuff, those were Christian, like usually it was Catholic. Like Irish is big on Catholicism. The Catholic monks wrote down the stories. We have them today because Christianity saved their culture and heritage. Same thing with the North Scandinavian stuff. Like in Iceland, the people who wrote down the sagas and Eddas were Christian. If you look at Norway, the oldest book found in Norway, Dr. Jackson Crawford just posted a video. It is a prayer book for a church from 1100 CE. The Christians were writing a lot of this stuff down for us. So, yeah, it's awesome. So, looking and being interested in both, I think makes a lot of sense to me. So, with circle stuff, we were talking about the fact that there are different ways of using it. There's different reasons people might cast a circle. So you might look at stuff like in these theories of how it's casted, so you can do a ritual, a spell, a reading. It's a form of protection to keep things out. You can cast a circle around your home. You can also do a warding or stuff. So you can do different things for protecting, keeping things out, as well as keeping things in to build them up for energy purposes. So where does the idea of a circle come from, and who else used to do circle casting? So I tried to look into this. Now, interestingly enough, there's a lot of symbolism behind circles. There's also a lot of stuff that you can go back thousands of years. You can see stuff like Stonehenge, which is built in circles. You've heard of crop circles. There is this power of this unbroken ring. People sitting in a woman's circle, or having a little get together where everyone sits on the ground in a circle, like they'll say, oh, sitting Indian style. Like people being in a circle, the round table from King Arthur and Arthurian legends. The circle has symbolism in the fact that there is equality. There is no head of the table, so to speak. Everyone is there on equal terms. Everyone's connected, and there's a community, and there is something protective about that, having that circle, having a boundary drawn, and the furthest you can get out from yourself, and you do it in all directions, creates a circle. So if you're trying to keep someone at a certain distance and you trace it around yourself, it's like 6 feet away and go all around and you're in the center, that's a circle. So there's a lot of symbolism. Wedding bands are circles because of eternity. It doesn't have a beginning or an end, so it has an eternity association with it. The Ouroboros, the serpent that's biting its own tail, is constantly going in a circle. It's that infinity, that's eternity. If you look at the moon or the sun, even though they're not actual circles, they look and appear to be spherical and have a circular shape to them. So there's a lot of power drawn into circles throughout history. So if you're putting borders and stuff around stuff, in a circle makes sense for protection. If you look at Scandinavian shields, they were circular. Now, yes, other cultures had different shaped shields to protect in different fashions, but one interpretation I'm making and one connection I'm making to circles is the Scandinavian round shield. I personally celebrate both Christmas and Yule. I see them both as observing the winter solstice. Yeah, I know a lot of people that do that, and honestly, there's no reason you can't. Do what makes sense to you. You don't have to answer to anyone but yourself. It's your spiritual path. And if someone tries to make you feel bad for doing that, they can just go piss off, because it's not their business to tell you what you can or can't do. I've talked to people, and like I said, they do Christmas simply because it is time to get together with family. People who are not Christian. Obviously, if people are Christian, they might do it for Christ. They might go to Christmas Mass. That's fine too. It's okay to have multiple people in a culture and society practice the same holiday for different reasons, just like it's okay for some people to not do it at all. I am annoying to my family because the majority of my family does Christmas, and I don't personally want to be associated with Christmas because it's not my spiritual path, so I make a big stink out of it. So I kind of frustrate a lot of people because I have to go out of my way to say, but I'm not doing Christmas. I'm showing up to spend time with you. That's the only reason I'm here. I'm here to see family. Potato, it's tomato, whatever. It is what it is. Again, but if you find something and it works for you, just do it. That makes sense to me. Let's get to screen sharing, because I like to share references and sources. And yes, I have Wikipedia, some of the sources, because some of this stuff is hard to track down. So with a lot of those traditions, like I said, I don't remember where I first heard them or got them from. So I wanted to know, well, where did it start, and what's the oldest reference to circle casting? Because we see circles, like I said, we see circles, like if you go back a few thousand years. Let's see. So here's like some of the Irish circles that you can find still standing today that are like 5,000 years old. Now, this is not casting a magic circle. This is a permanent space. So when you're casting a circle, it is a temporary space that is meant to be taken down. It's not like having a sacred space permanently, like a grove of trees, or having Stonehenge or something like that. So there was, traditionally in different cultures, such as the Irish stuff, 6,000 years ago, you had stone circles. Apparently, there were some that were found in Poland from 7,000 years ago as well. So they have these like ritualistic sites that they found with circles. Again, circles. Circles are a historically powerful symbol. That doesn't mean the modern version of casting a circle for protection or for spellcraft is traceable to these, might have been inspired by. Remember how we were just talking about, in my opinion, people get inspired by their stuff, and they should be. This is one way. So what I did find is I found on Wikipedia, they were talking about magic circles, and on here they mentioned 4 big categories. So in summer, they talk about the Sumerians, who called the practice of using ritual circles, I can't pronounce this, but it looks like Zisuri. I'll start posting these links. Oh, let me actually open the last 2 that I just closed, just in case you want to see some of these links yourself. I'll start posting them in the chat. So there's the circle for the Irish stuff that I was just talking about. Here is the Polish website one for the 7,000-year-old Polish circles. And again, you know, some of these sources, you got to be careful when you're looking up sources. How accurate are they? Is it hearsay? Is it historical? Can you trust the people that are writing the article? A lot of that is questionable, and I realize that, but I'm trying to find something beyond just hearing it written in a couple of books. That's where I'm going with this. I'm doing online research in hopes of finding something to connect the pieces together. What I prefer to do is find old books on Internet Archive. The funny thing is, most of the books that I find are from the 1900s. So here's the Wikipedia link for magic circles. And in this particular link, what we're doing is we're looking at the 4 different ones. So the Sumerian practices with this Zisuru, I was the way I would pronounce it. And you can cite the sources on Wikipedia. So what I try to do is I try to track them down to the sources and find out more information still. In Judaism. And so supposedly there was this custom of surrounding, and this is from 1560. So this is a little bit older source. This rabbi here, I can't pronounce his name, I'm going to attempt to. So apparently when a woman was giving birth, they would cast a circle of protection to keep Lilith and demons at bay. So here's the thing. The first source, Sumerian, is questionable. Like, how accurate is that? I did find some old Sumerian, Babylonian type of tablets, which I'll show you here in a second, which relate to this practice, and they would actually draw their circle in flour or salt. So this gives some credit to individuals. So salt is a purification thing. Yes, it's used for cooking too, but spiritually, we use it for purification. Why? I don't know. Another one of those things I need to dig into at some time. So salt's supposed to have a purifying property, and it's supposed to repel negativity and evil, especially if it's pure salt. Like sea salt, very popular among the New Age practices today. So drawing a circle in salt, having a fistful of salt and tracing a circle, makes a lot of sense to me. Supposedly it comes from here. I don't know how accurate that is, but that at least gives us some credence to this being an old practice from thousands of years ago. All the other stuff, tapping the staff around in a circle or tracing it with an anathema or speaking a ritual spell or incantation as you're doing it, cast the circle thrice about to keep unwelcome spirits out, whatever the case may be, I don't know historically that's from the past. The Judaism from Jewish traditions, this is more modern, and this is a Christian practice. I guess Jewish practices are not Christian, Christians specifically with Christ. So it's a monotheistic practice. Judaism would be considered monotheistic. So even from the 1560s, apparently they would take a knife and cut into the ground a circle to keep demons at bay. So drawing a circle in basically Jewish mysticism, which you will find, or at least what I have found so far, is there's a lot of stuff from Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism that's used in neo-paganism today. A lot of stuff that is claimed to be witchcraft or is claimed to be Wiccan, or even now Norse pagan, comes from Jewish mysticism. Or stuff like the Key of Solomon. A lot of modern practices. You want to talk about the Norse Scandinavian stuff? Like if you talk about Aegis Hjalmar or Vigvisir or some of those symbols, those are modern symbols from 1860, Geir Vigvason, Hold manuscript. You can look that up. We'll talk about that in different lives, but it looks a lot like the Key of Solomon symbols. So a lot of modern monotheistic stuff, like even if you take Druidry, a lot of modern Druidry, you can trace it back about 300 years to Wales, to Iolo Morganlug, and he was a Christian. Druid was synonymous with basically being like a philosopher, as modern Druidry is concerned. And a lot of the modern Druids were Christians until they started becoming neo-pagans in the last 100 to 200 years. So again, a lot of modern stuff. This is why I'm trying to trace it back. That actually plays a little bit in what I'm saying about people say that Christianity has pagan DNA. Well, modern paganism has Christian DNA from Christian practices. So that's one. Golden Dawn is another one. So the third option here is talking about the Golden Dawn, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And their stuff, again, if you go down to this bottom here, includes ceremonial magicians, Hermetic Kabbalists. So the Hermetics comes from Hermes, Emerald Tablet, which we'll get into in the other live. That was one of the topics I wanted to discuss. That's why I listed in my poll, do you want to hear about the Emerald Tablet? Do you want to hear about how basically modern paganism has Christian DNA? Or do you want to hear about magic circles? Because my research into magic circles has led me down the path of these other items that I want to dig into further. So we're starting with magic circles for today. Neo-pagan and Thelmanites. So the Golden Dawn, it's not that it's all exclusively Christian in its origins, but actually no, in its origins I would almost argue it is very Christian in its practices. It draws a lot from the Emerald Tablet. It draws a lot from Kabbalah, which is Jewish mysticism. So again, there's a lot of things here you're going to see very similar. And then Wicca, which we all know, we've talked about before. Wicca is modern. It's from the last 100 years. Now, they borrow from old traditions, but borrowing from old traditions is not being an old tradition. There is a difference there. And until someone can prove to me and show me in writing, in print, the origin of Wicca being older than a couple hundred years ago, like, I don't want to hear about you using the occasional practice or they were called something else. As soon as you say they were called something else, it's now a different practice. You are now borrowing and you're creating something new, which, again, commendable to make something new, but do not lie on origins. That drives me nuts. Absolutely insane. And yeah, some of these citations are stuff like Cunningham. Now we're getting into Llewellyn Publications, all the books on the wall. Again, not all of my books are from Llewellyn, but a lot are. Buckland, Raymond Buckland. There's another modern source. Starhawk, modern source from 1989. Buckland, 2002, 2002, 2001, 2009, 2010, 2002. Every single one of these books but one that are citations for this information are modern books. Now, that's not to say they couldn't have older references, but again, late 1900s for a lot of this stuff that's practiced. Let me get back to the chat before we get to some of these other sites. I'm really fascinated by ancient stone circles. Absolutely. Like I said, I think it's undoubtable. Blah, blah, blah. There's enough evidence, in my opinion, to support circles being important in modern reconstruction revival stuff because it was important to the ancestors. But then again, they used to bleed people out as a form of healing, so they also thought the world was flat at one time. Some still do today. But it's like, having that connection, I think, is cool. I have a tattoo on my hand that is from a old site that is pre-Celtic. It's older than the Celts. And there's a tomb, underground hill mound thing in Ireland. And every year on Yule, on the winter solstice, the light will shine in and illuminate the entire inside. And they have these symbols carved into it. This triskele, this spiral, these circles is an old symbol. And yeah, I tattooed something on my hand because it was on an old stone, because it has meaning to myself today, which might not necessarily be the original meaning of the origin of the symbol. Nothing wrong with that, but again, at least understand it. I understand that this comes from an old symbol, older than I understand. And then we'll never have an answer to, because it's scribbled on stone and we don't know why. Wikipedia itself is not very reliable, but the references down at the bottom of the page are good for starting points. Yes, I agree with you, Sword Sister. I do not feel like Wikipedia is the end-all, be-all, or the best. The problem I was having with magic circles is, aside from Wikipedia, there wasn't a lot of references, because I believe casting magic circles is a modern practice. I don't think it has a lot of ancient practice other than this one where they claim it's from Sumeria, and then I tried to look that up and validate it. I went and tried to find, and we'll get into this in a second here, and I'll share those links as well. I tried to trace it back. The fact that Wikipedia is the easiest to find resource on magic circles makes me question it even further. Now, and like I said, we could look up stuff in the Key of Solomon and stuff like that too. So we have other Solomon. Key of Solomon. Of course, and it takes me right to Wikipedia. Key of Solomon. Yeah. Internet Archive. There we go. So Internet Archive is one of my favorite places because it'll show you at the bottom. So this is from 1889. Again, late 1800s, early 1900s, as most of the books are. And it has a lot of circular uses in their symbols, but looking through older books like this is what I prefer to find resources to. But I don't think there's anything about circle casting in here. I think you can type in words and it can like look through. That's why I like sources like this. I love to have the physical books if I can, but with sharing stuff online, so without a circle being prepared whatsoever. So apparently there is. Okay, here we go on page 13. I should have went here first. See, now I'm glad you brought that up. So in the Key of Solomon on page 13 from a copy from 1889 is talking about, let me zoom in. Let's see. So, but if thou shalt wish to work by night, perfect thy work on the succeeding night. If by day, seeing that the day beneatheth with the rising of the sun, the succeeding day, but the hour of inception is the hour of Mercury. Verily, since no experiment for converse with spirits can be done without a circle being prepared, whatsoever experiments therefore thou whilst to undertake for conversing with spirits therein, thou must learn to construct a certain particular circle, that being done, surrounded that circle with a circle of art for better caution and efficiency. So we do have a reference to magic circles right here in the Key of Solomon from the 1800s. But again, we're talking about modern practices. And this is from Jewish mysticism. So again, this traces us back to what that second source was on Wikipedia, which is talking about the Jews using circles for protection. So circle protection, we can, I feel like, confidently trace back to Jewish mysticism. But older than that, I don't know if I can find stuff older than that. Obviously, I'm still looking. Anytime, even when I share stuff, I'm sharing it for reference. And here, I'll go ahead and share the Key of Solomon in case folks want to check that out too. And I'm going to add that to my list to dig into further. So let me take this here. So Key of Solomon. And I'm going to say page 13. And I'm going to take the text. See, I'm all about sources. Sources, sources, sources. If not, it's just theory. And I'm fine with theory, but I think we need sources. Ooh, no, I was trying to highlight. Text. Like that. Copy. Let's see if it actually lets me copy and paste text. Yes. Yes. So there's the text. There's the text in question. Oh, no, that's too long, apparently. Ooh, can't paste that. Anyway, but yeah, no, that's cool. I'm glad you brought that up. But no, I agree. Wikipedia is questionable, but it's still something that is a stepping stone to look further, which is what I typically try to do. I just didn't even think about looking in the Key of Solomon. Salt absorbs energy, they say. Yeah, I've heard things like that too. Blaze, I also wanted to tell you, thank you for all the links you shared last stream. I'm really enjoying the Welsh Viking channel and others. Thanks again. Absolutely, and feel free to let them know that Blaze sent you. Get me some traction. Someone asked earlier about if I had a Patreon. I don't have a Patreon yet, but that's the best way to support me is get the word out there. There's this fun guy to interact with on YouTube that talks about stuff like this. I think its salt crystallized nature must be disturbing the settled magnetism of the object. That's what I'm guessing, at least. I don't know enough to confirm or deny that, but definitely an interesting theory, and I appreciate you sharing it, Sword Sister. Forgotten books. Imprint has a very large selection of books on occult, historical, pagan, etc., of very old books. Really? So you said forgotten books? Well, I'm going to add that to my list of things to check out. And that, ooh, okay. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Is this the right page? Am I on the right page? This is exactly what I'm talking about, because sometimes people have sources. And I will tell you, and I will tell everyone on multiple streams, if I am wrong, let me know and back it up with sources. And I'll admit it. I'm sharing with you what I understand as of today. And I am not arrogant enough to think that I have all the answers. Everything that we know or think we know, we learn from someone. Like, sometimes it's someone taught it to us, or they told it to us, or we read it, we looked it up, we heard it. And sometimes we come up with our own opinions. Many of the times, those opinions are based upon what we have heard or looked at elsewhere. People have confirmation bias. They want to find confirmation that helps prove to them what they already think is true. It's that echo chamber that people look for. But thank you for that source. So I'll post that below as well so that folks can check that out. G, hey, good to see you, G. Welcome, man. Golden Dawn rituals are very Abrahamic. Yes, they are. So there's a group called the Freemasons, and I think some of their practices are similar to the Golden Dawn. When my father passed away, during his funeral, they did a ceremony, and they said stuff like, blessed be. They put ferns on his box of ashes and everything. Like it felt very what you typically see in New Age paganism today. It's interesting because, again, I think religion and spirituality is religion and spirituality. I don't think we need to get caught up too much on what came first so much as what feels right. And if it feels right, do it. I just want to know why. If we're doing a circle, why are we doing a circle? Who said to do it first? What's the theory of doing a circle? So if it feels right to me to use salt or flour and trace a circle before I do something, then I will. And I don't care how old it is. I don't care if it came from Jewish mysticism. I don't care if it's from Abrahamic religions or further back. If it works for me and feels right, I will do it. But I want to know the theory and practice behind it. So let's look at some of these other sites here. So that's the Magic Circle one from Wikipedia. Now, here's where I was trying to look up. So here's the rabbi, and I searched his name from Wikipedia to try to find more information. Now, as I'm going down here, I had some issues here. I'll post this site too, because again, I want to share my sources. I think that's important. Because again, just like Sword Sister's saying, it's a good jumping off point. If I see something, I want to go confirm it. I don't want to just repeat it, and I want to encourage others to be the same way. Don't just repeat it or say that's what we've always done. Why have we always done that? Why are they saying that? Is it true? Me and my wife were watching on TikTok that apparently bears don't really hibernate, and we looked it up. It was wrong. People say wrong things all the time, either because they're wrong, they're misled, they misunderstood, they misinterpreted. Like, confirm and verify. It's not hard. Time-consuming, but not hard. So I tried to look through these sources here. I did find one book. Most of these books have nothing to do with what they're claiming. This goes into, again, talking about how it's not only a Kabbalistic practice, Kabbalah, but it was talking here as well about using circle of protection type stuff as well. So, yeah, that's a site you can check out. There's some sources below. I was having issues looking through the sources, but supposedly they lead you to where circles might have been created. And I'm sorry, here's the same website. It's wikiwan.com. And again, I don't know how accurate they are, so I wanted to go to the next one, trying to trace things down. This talks about the actual ritual. So it says Zir Suru, meaning magic circle drawn with flour. So again, it's like, okay, so it's making references to this, but where does this come from? So then I started looking through these sources. So I wanted to look up this cuneiform inscriptions of Western Asia, volume 4. So I tried to find that. Let me pull this down a little bit further. So I ran into this book on Internet Archive. And on this book here, these are images that are supposedly images relating to these tablets. So they drew out the tablets, and this is supposed to be what was written on the tablets. Now, I don't know how to read this or translate this, so this doesn't help me at all. But these are supposedly those tablets that claim they used flour or salt. So then I tried to dig into this further. So I found another book, which you have to pay for, which I can't find, but I did find an open access section. So in this book, here's the main book, and then I'll show you the page. Because again, I'm going through those pages quickly because I want to show you. I went from Wiki to here, to here, to here, to here. That's how I found this other source. I wanted to show you my path that led me down to sharing what I actually want to share, which is this. So having Control F on your keyboard, oops, Control F, yeah, circle, and takes me down to where it says circle. Supposedly in this book it says hand wiping rituals, taboo illnesses, and now it has that word that we were talking about, Zirsuru, magic circle of flour. So it does have a reference in this book which talks about, again, Band 9 Assyrian and Babylonian scholarly text categories. And this is on the section for exorcism. So this is the Exorcist Manual, Car 44, which is from that book. So I sent you the main book. It's M.J. Geller. It shows the source and reference on it. It shows the part where you can find it. Did I share the second one? I did not share the second one. Let me show you the second one. So this is where you can actually search for circle, but that's all it says. So I'm having issues confirming that this whole Zurusu is old, that it actually comes from a tablet, that it was translated correctly, but this might have been what inspired it. Okay, so here you go. This is where it's supposedly from, and this is where it talks about some of it. I still have not seen the actual tablets, unless you want to say this is the tablets, which I can't read anyway. So, as you can see, this first reference here leads me down a path of I'm not sure. I can't confirm that this is actually circle magic for protection way back here. Now, I showed you earlier in the stream where we talked about 6,000 years ago we have these stone circles, 7,000 years ago in Poland we have these stone circles. So we know there was some sort of ritualistic association with circles, but specifically casting a circle for protection or for raising spiritual vibration seems to come from Jewish mysticism, as far as I can tell. That seems to be the oldest source. So let me close all of those tabs because you get that. Found some other sites that are also questionable. This one here, I don't know how accurate this one is. I'll get to the questions in just a second. I don't want to ignore chat, but I want to get through this section here. Actually, here, this is a good stopping point because I was showing you at least for... No. This is connected with it. I'm sorry. So there is a comment right here, which talks about the Zurusu derived from Sumerian was a defensive measure drawn on the ground around clay figures, using flour as part of a Babylonian ritual to thwart evil spirits. This circle was also drawn around a 6-person's bed to protect them against ghost demons or curses. The choice of flour was crucial to the purpose of the ritual. Some types of wheat flour could repel ghosts. Other types were for ritually invoking personal gods, and barley flour was used to encircle beads of the sick. Now, there's supposedly this image here, which I can't blow up because I can't click it. I guess we can try to open the image in a new tab, but as you can see, it's really hard to see, so let me try to zoom in. I mean, I guess that kind of looks similar to that one book, so I don't know, you know? There's not enough information here for me to say this is accurate. And then I tried to look, like, where did you get this information from? And I'm not seeing a resource. I mean, I see something here, and that might be something. And there's also this Religion of the Babylonians from 1908. But again, 1900s. It's a 1900s interpretation. So again, 100 to 200 years ago. There are the sources down here, and I haven't clicked any of these. So before I actually click any of these here, because maybe there are sources that I can use down here, let me answer some of your questions first. I cannot remember a single Sumerian or ancient Egyptian text referring to circle casting. Right. And this is why I like to go down these paths like this. I remember a lot of magic from that era being based on fetish charm building. That reminds me, I should take another look. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Cool. Thank you for confirming, and thank you for sharing that site, Forgotten Books. They are reprints all the way back to things like Zoroastrian, Hindu, and all manner through the centuries. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's a really good resource. I'm definitely going to add that and save that and look into that further. Thanks for the links. Absolutely. Like I said, I'm not trying to come across and tell you that this is what I have found to connect. So it started out with me knowing how circles are cast from 1990s when I was doing research, but I don't know the origin or why. I know why we do it today, but I don't know where it came from. And I just want to acknowledge where it comes from. That's what I'm trying to get to. I'm trying to find the original practices and why people use it today. Blaze, have you heard of Dr. Robert Price? He's a Bible scholar and historian with 2 PhDs, I think. I think you and him would have some really interesting conversations together. I have not heard of him. That might be someone I might look into. Thank you for bringing them up, the Dusty Dud. Are they on YouTube or anything? Or like, what's a good way to have a conversation? Even though I would love to have a conversation with anyone, not sure how to go about contacting them. Oh, look right here. One of their resources is Wikipedia. Literally that site that I was looking at with specifically the Zurusu. So that's one of their sources for this information. So what's some of their other sources? I should have opened in a new tab. So this is, see, I would have to download the PDF, which I don't feel comfortable doing. But supposedly this is one, oh, here we go. And if I look for flower or yes, none of that pops up right away. Unless I'm not able to search it because it's an image, which is possible. But this is also, even if we talk about this book here, again, a lot of 1900 references. That seems to be where all of this stuff seems to be coming from, is the 1900s. Early 1900s, late 1800s. Which again, okay, fine. If it works for you, good, but so many things come from modern practices and they don't have any historical references. And circle is a translation. They might not have translated it right. What if they translated flower wrong? What if it's supposed to be some other thing? What if it's supposed to be actual flowers versus flowers made for bread, you know? Like, there's so many questions here. This just leads to more questions. Yeah, I don't know where they're getting all of this information that they're writing about how to cast these circles. Because looking at their resources here, what do we have here? The reports of the magicians and the astrologers. Okay, so what book is this? Because it's not letting me down to the bottom part, so this looks like Semitic Texts and Translation Series, Volume 7. Do we have a copyright date? $1900, again, 1900s. Preface here, since the year 1865. So they're talking about older stuff, but it's still from the 1900s. So what if I look for circle here? See if they mention drawing a circle and flower in this text. Moon circle, circle may be bright, circle is bright, complete circle, circle dimly visible. So yeah, nothing here about circle. If we mention flower, and there's no matches on flower. So again, it's like they're claiming to use these sources and stuff, but I'm not finding anything that suggests what they're typing out is exactly 100% accurate. So where did they get that information from? Like, if you can't confirm what they're saying, how can you trust it as being accurate? And this CAR 44, you remember what this CAR 44 was? This is that same research that I was talking about in Jewish mysticism. So now, if we are doing it, we might be able to trace it back, and here's the tablets it's supposedly based off of. Yeah, this is that cumin, the cumeniform. So this seems to be a lot of the sources, and a lot of this stuff seems like it's related around Kabbalah stuff. Seems like it. Interesting. So I guess you're just going to have to trust that they wrote it out correctly. But this section here is one of the few that I can find that digs in a little bit deeper, but it feels questionable to me. This is that wallflower one, by the way. If you want to research that, scroll to the bottom. You've got some sources that they're claiming, and then there's this section here on the tablet and drawing a circle and flower. Here's another one. Oh, we got some more. He goes on different channels, lives, to talk about religion and history. He really loves this stuff. I think you getting him on a live would be pretty cool. Yeah, I'd be down for that. I love talking with people. You can YouTube Dr. Robert M. Price. Okay. Yeah, I'll check it out. Thank you. Living a Spiritual Life. History of Circle Casting. So in this, they talk about Wicca, and they talk about why people would cast it, and what direction, and different, and like, it just... And here's your sources. Intro to Paganism Study Guide. You know, from 2016. It's like, okay. So you're talking about modern practice and repeating modern practice. Magic circles and circle casting. And it has Gerald Gardner casting a circle around a statue that looks like a demon. And again, it goes into different techniques for doing it. Circle casting dragon style. Poetry for the Day circle casting. So it's this entire site, and I'll share it even though I'm not a fan of it. It seems, again, to suggest it's all modern stuff that we're doing. It's not old. Circle casting is not super old. It doesn't seem like it. This one here, I actually have seen this guy for a while, and I don't remember why I started following him. I don't remember if we talked. But John Beckett, who does the Pantheos Pagan channel, he has a section here about circle casting and calling directions and what he does. And it's just personal experience stuff. It's just a blog. It's still interesting to read, so I'll still share it. But again, I'm trying to consider as many things as I can and as many different perspectives as possible when going through this. And that gets us caught up to where we left off. So here's that one Irish one that I was telling you about. 10 most impressive prehistoric stone circles in Ireland. So, and then it's Forgotten Books is the last part. So I'm saving that. I'm going to check that out later. That was the main things I had for today's discussion, was to talk about the circle, talk about why some folks might do it today, what I remember reading about it, and then some of the origins of where it may or may not have started from. And as you can see, a lot of those are fairly questionable and kind of iffy. So apologize if... Oh, I missed one. Egyptian Magic by E.A. Wallace Budge is a good book, by the way. What does that cover, Sword Sister? I apologize, I missed your comment from earlier. I was posting links and I was going off of my tangent. Blah. Words are hard. Yeah, there definitely seems to be a lot of references for what people do today and they try to say is neo-paganism. A lot of it seems to come from Hinduism, Jewish mysticism, and Egyptian-inspired practices. Like, those three sources seems to be where most of the stuff is coming from. As I'd mentioned, there was three that kicked off a lot of the modern Reconstruction revival movements: Aleister Crowley, Gerald Gardner, and Ross Nichols. And all three of them had similar sources, which would be some form of Abrahamic religion, which they tried to keep stories alive. Or in the case, like, look at Aleister Crowley. He has his Book of the Law, which is supposedly dictated to him by Thoth or Thoth. I don't know how you'd pronounce his name. But it's a deity from Egyptian practices and traditions. I actually think I have a copy of the Book of the Law. Yeah, right over there. So that's his Thelmi or his Thelmites. So it's like, I don't know. It leaves a lot of questions. That's, I think, my main point there is just all of the questions that are coming up. But we're nearing the hour mark, so I do want to pause. That's what I want to discuss today for circles. But I also want to take additional questions. So if anyone has additional questions, thoughts, or things that you wanted to discuss before we end today's live, now is the time to ask them before we end the live. Going to copy Dr. Robert M. Price. I'll take a look at that after the live. Oh, I've seen him before. I've actually seen some of his recent conversations while I was looking through some of this stuff. Oh, sorry. It is... No, you're fine. No apologies needed. It is generally It is a general overview on ancient Egyptian magic based on the archaeological evidence. It's worth taking a look at. Yeah, let's see. Egyptian magic. Let's see. Let's check out my favorite site, which is Internet Archive. It's on Internet Archive. Nice. Is this the one? (2011). I appreciate that. I'll save that and add that to my reading list. I've got so many books to get through. It's like, I swear I buy books just to buy books half the time. Let's see. Ronald Hutton is another guy I want to read a lot of his books. I bought his Blood and Mistletoe book I've been wanting to read for a while now, and I haven't gotten around to yet. save that? Oh, so even though this is added date in 2011, the book is actually from, it says 1857 to 1934. It hits that time period again. I'm getting a huge kick out about how many of these books and theories come from the same time period. And I really feel like some people got misled with some of the things that blew up out there, and how everyone was an expert, was printing books even without being able to validate sources of where things come from. Once we started questioning sources, a lot of the stuff disappeared. What do you think America and Europe would be like if Christianity would have fizzled out? I don't know. I think that at the end of the day, the push for Christianity, I personally feel, was a method of control. You had a lot of tribal societies in Europe, and they were warring and fighting with each other constantly. So how do you unify a people? You unify them under a belief system, and then you have laws in place to dictate good human behavior so they're not trying to hurt each other. So I think that a lot of Christianity rose out of the need for people to stop fighting amongst themselves. That's what helped unify them. So without that unity, I'm not sure Americans would have come over here. I think the indigenous people would still be here alone, and I think Europe would still be isolated to small groups and clans versus being unified countries like we have today. That's my theory. I don't know. There's not enough, and it's been so long that not who's to say something else might not have risen instead. Probably would have been something else that would have risen to try to push for where we are today in modern society, in my opinion. Very interesting discussion. You can choose one topic and end up covering all manner of things. Makes it interesting to hear everyone's input. Yes. Yeah, I want to keep my lives, like for a while there it was just chatting lives, but this time I thought maybe having a focus on the chat would help, A, inspire people to come because they're interested in the topic, but also help drive the conversation forward. But I do like keeping it open. I do like other things being brought up. I have no problem with additional questions or off-topic conversations. I like talking. I have a passion about this stuff. Like I said, I just like to discuss. Say, like, if Rome never converted and stayed pagan. Right. I like Hutton's books on Druids. Same. Yeah, like I said, that's my biggest push right now, is trying to find out historical accuracies. Because a lot of people are still living in disbelief. They don't want to believe what things were. Like, Druids are interesting in the fact that Druids is what we call them today. I don't even think that's a term that they used during the time period for who the ancient Druids were. I don't think they called themselves Druids. I don't know what they called themselves, but I'm pretty sure Druids is more of a, like, couple hundred years ago term. And then a lot of people are like, oh, Druids are these nature-loving people, and they're one with the earth, and they're spiritual, and it's about communing with nature and animals and connecting with them, and they would never harm an animal, and they were probably vegetarian, and it goes down this really hippie path. No, Druids were more of the spiritual and legal leaders of the societies of the Celtic-speaking clans. You know, they were like lawyers and doctors and scientists and priests, and they're kind of they filled the role of the higher groups of societies. And they absolutely did human and animal sacrifices, and people don't want to admit that. No, they would never. Yeah, we have evidence that they did. Oh no, what evidence do we have? All right, look up the Bogman that they found tied, gagged, and ritualistically had his throat cut. That survived in the bogs. I think it's in Ireland. Look up Bogman. There's one evidence there. We also have evidence for Wicca people, which is where they had these giant effigies that they would fill with captured people from war, prisoners of war, that they would burn, or criminals that were being put to death, that they would burn people alive. Like, we have evidence of them doing this stuff from those time periods. It's like, I'm sorry, it's not all butterflies and rainbows, but it's the reality of the situation. I don't know. People want to live in a fantasy, which I get. I love fantasy. I love fiction. But I also like historically accurate evidence on stuff too. It would be interesting to really take a step back and see what was going on socially, academically, and psychologically during the occult revival from the 1880s to the 1920s. I agree. There's actually a really cool interview that I think is worth checking out. Let me share that really quick. So if you don't know who Ed Fitch is, Ed Fitch's Grimoire of Shadows is fantastic, but he also copies a lot of it out of stuff like from Franz Barnes' one book. It's almost an exact duplication. Again, people learn from somewhere and they repeat it. Interview. Let's see. Ed Fitch. And what was the other guy's name? The creepy guy that started ADF. Isaac Bonowitz. See if I can find the interview. It has them speaking, and they're interviewing them about occult practices. And hearing them speak, it's kind of, it's fascinating. But then realizing some of the things that they did. But these are the fathers of modern occultism, like some of them. Yep, here it is. Here it is.
That big rock back there, that's the whole...
If you have not seen this video, highly recommend it. So that's a YouTube link. And it is a video where they're interviewing a couple of the individuals who are in the occultism and got a lot of it started today. It gives you at least a window into it. There's also interviews with Gerald Gardner if you ever want to check those out. Blaze, you said last week you see a lot of singularities in different pagan cultures. Can you go into more detail on that? A lot of... What do you mean? You might have to give me some different context on what I had originally said. I would love to go into more detail on it, but I just need more context. Druidism has been perhaps the most fantasized path, especially from the 1800s. Yes. I have to leave early, I'm afraid. Thank you again for the great talk. Have a good rest of the day, everyone. Thanks, Sword Sister. Always a pleasure to see you. Thank you for the book to consider checking out, and I will catch you in the future. You're on Discord. Feel free to drop a message anytime. Singularities in different pagan cultures. Similarities. Ah, yes. So what I mean, like, I don't remember exactly at the point that I brought it up or what I was thinking at the time, but hold on. Thanks for the link. I love old interviews from eccentric individuals. Absolutely, I do too. Because again, it gives you a different perspective. Like, oh, these are those people that I read books about. Isaac Bonowitz is one of the scarier ones in the fact of what his crimes were. So ADF was started by Isaac Bonowitz, and Isaac Bonowitz is the one who coined the term Druidism. Ism as in a religion versus Druidry, which was coined by Ross Nichols, because it was meant to be a spirituality that could work with any spirituality, any religions. You could basically be a Christian Druid if you follow the Druidry of Ross Nichols. Now, Isaac Bonowitz actually... I don't want to get my YouTube video flagged, but did things you shouldn't do with young children. And even though that's not related in any way, shape, or form to his pagan practices, the fact that he did those types of things, and I believe was actually convicted, is rather disturbing. ADF now has nothing to do with it, which I think is interesting because he started a Druid fellowship, and then they completely cut ties with him. It's like, why don't you just rename the whole thing and start your own thing? But I guess ADF had already picked up and already had a big thing. So it's interesting that guy you see in that interview, you wouldn't think that he would be a predator. And yeah, he was. And it's a shame. He had a book, which I actually bought. It's very hard to get a hold of, and it's very expensive. And it's called Druidism or something like that. I think I have it over there. Sorry, I've got so many books. And I will do a library tour one day. People have been asking for it for years because I've got like 4 or 5 shelves of occult books. But I don't know. A lot of them I wouldn't recommend. A lot of them are kind of... I can't verify as being accurate. But yes, similarities between the different pagan groups. What I specifically mean is the fact that when you talk about neo-Reconstruction revival groups, and again, I'm not sure where my mind was last week, you see them doing a lot of similar stuff. Celebrating the holidays, having some sort of a code of honor, casting spells or doing magic and ritual of some form, wearing protective amulets or rings or talismans or stones, and having some form of deity or god. multiple, like pantheon of them. And when you start comparing the way that people who call themselves witches compare them to people who call themselves Wiccan, Norse pagan, or Druids today, those are some of the neo-pagan groups. You find that some of the practices that are done, they all do, but they can't tell you where it came from. It's just what you do. So that's what I meant by similarities. Also, when you talk about individuals who are trying to do earth spiritual based practices, they take it into ritualistic and sympathetic approaches. So, for example, you might have in witchcraft practice of drawing down the moon, and one way of doing it is to take a chalice and receiving the vibrations from the moon into the cup and then drinking and consuming the liquid which is blessed by the moon as one way of doing it. Then you might have something like that identical in Wicca, also drawing down the moon, because Wicca and witchcraft, it seems like a lot of Wiccans practice forms of witchcraft. Then you might have something in Norse traditions. You have what's called a blot, which is a sacrifice, and they'll take something like, typically you'll see like a drinking horn, and they'll fill it with mead or some other form of liquid, and likewise they will hold it to the sky to receive a blessing and then drink it to consume that blessing. In Druidry, you might do the same thing where you bless the water, and you might take a sprig from like a evergreen tree or blue spruce or something along those lines and dip it and flick the water at each of the individuals in a circle to give them a blessing from the blessed water that you have. So it's like there's this enchantment aspect of the water, or you might see witches and Wiccans typically will wear pentacles around their neck. Heathens will typically wear Mjolnir around their neck. Druids, you'll see different things, but I typically will see Awen, or I will see a Triskele around their neck. So like a Triskele or something, or they will have Awen, or they'll have, if they're part of the Obod, Bards, Ovates, and Druids. I thought I had an Awen that I had created on a disc. Sorry, I've got so much crap in my drawer here. Alwyn. So it's like, that dug into that way too much to answer one small question like that. So that's what I mean by similarities. It seems like it's different flavors of the same thing. It feels like to me. That's just my own personal interpretation of it. Tried to type similarities. Thanks for the link. I love old interview. Okay, cool. I am all caught up on chat. Well, we hit an hour and a half, and because I'm hoping to encourage individuals to watch these after we've already gone live, I'm probably going to end it here. I want to try to keep my lives to about an hour. Hour and a half is not the end of the world. But anyway, thank you all for hanging out. I will try to do another live again next Saturday around the same time. So if there's topics you're interested in, I have a community tab. I also have a Discord. You're welcome to join at any time. And I will catch you in future ones. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your support. And I'll see you.